The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello everybody and welcome to the Centre Standardisation Training for Hairdressing Level 3 Technical Qualification. My name's Alison Atkinson and I'm a Principal Moderator for City and Guilds. In the room with me today is Margaret Buckfield, who is the Principal Moderator for this qualification. So she'll be taking you through the slide deck for most of this presentation. So I'd like to just say that if we have any delegates that have logged on for Level 2 hairdressing, please stay on the line because you will get some information that will be useful to you. But we also have a questions and answers session at the end, so you'll be able to answer some questions regarding Level 2, I'm sure. And if not, we'll point those questions to the Principal Moderator for Level 2 hair. So just to clarify, all participants are currently in listen-only mode whilst we take you through a set of slides. There'll be an opportunity to have your questions answered at the end of the presentation, so please take a note as we go through. At any time, you can type those questions into the questions panel in the questions box on the control panel on the right-hand side of your screen. And if any of you are experiencing any technical difficulties, then I would point you towards the moderation support team, who will be happy to help you. Obviously, I'll keep an eye on what's going on those questions as Margaret talks through the slides. But the moderation support team's number is 01924 206 719, and I'm sure they will be happy to help you. So as an extension of the generic centre standardisation webinar that I delivered and is recorded and available to you on the website, City and Guilds have produced subject-specific ones where we carry out standardisation on some learner work from last year's synoptic assignment. You were sent this work along with the associated paperwork and asked to carry out a marking activity. Hopefully you've done this so that we can start to go through the thoughts and justifications of the marking by the Principal Moderator. So Margaret, I'll hand over to you and you can go through the objectives.
Hello everyone. Looking forward to this afternoon's session. Hopefully there's not anybody that's joined the second one and also we're at the first one, because you might think you've heard it all before and go to sleep, so we don't want that. So the objectives today are to explain the justification of marks by myself for the last year's synoptic assignment. Brief word of warning with this one, it is real work, but we have tried to fit them from the 8 AOs down to the 5 AOs. So there's some sort of slightly, it goes a little bit wonky in places, but I think we can still talk it through and it should still be helpful to you, hopefully. We're going to highlight good practice in the use of City and Guilds documents. So facilitating this standardisation activity, I know it's one way because you can't speak, but I can usually talk for England and talk for the rest of the nation. So those of you that know me, so hopefully we'll do okay. A reminder of typical activities for internal standardisation, because that's really important and very useful, especially for those that are doing this for the first time. And an opportunity for questions. So do keep those questions, type them in as you think of them if you want to, and we'll endeavour to answer them all at the end. So this is going to be an overview of last year's synoptic assignment. Remember that this year's assignment is different and you have all received those, or you can go up onto the website and see where they are. Word of warning, please make sure that you use the very latest assignment briefs. Don't think because you downloaded it last year, for those of you that delivered it, that that's exactly the same. It is not, and you might disadvantage your learners. So we're just going to remind ourselves what this assignment brief is. You've had it since September, I believe. So task 1, conditions of assessment. It's under supervised conditions. This is where the learner is planning their service. They may bring in their models or their clients that they're going to use and go through it that way. They do need to carry out any tests that are relevant to the service, especially the colour service that they're going to do. And also, even with this year's assignment, you are probably going to want to check out who they've picked, just to make sure they're not going to be disadvantaged. So in task 2, this is where they actually do the practical services, and those learners, when they've completed task 1, you collect that in and you give it back to them in task 2. And although in this year's assignment they'll be able to do the full consultation in task 1, that may well be up to a week beforehand. So you need to double check that the client model that they've got really wants to still have that service, and that it's appropriate for them to do so in case there's any changes in their health, etc., or any factors you need to consider. So they're going to do, or they did do, a creative cut and finish. And in here for last year we had an element of disconnection. You'll be pleased to see in this year's that that has been removed, never to be seen again. It's really part of you said and we did. I think when you sit in a room and you decide, how can we make this level 3? Oh yes, we'll have disconnection. And then when you put it in and you see how difficult that's been for learners to actually get models that are suitable. And we saw an awful lot of poor mothers that were dragged in and have suddenly got disconnected haircuts. And in the majority, they were undercuts, so it wasn't necessarily the most suitable style. Anyway, they also, we told them that adjusting the fringe only was not sufficient alteration of the shape. And I think you'll find in this year's task that we tighten that up too, with the amount of hair, that it has to really be a restyle and not just a little trim. So also they had to do within a 6-hour session a creative colour and finish, and part of that colour had to include an element of colour correction. I think sometimes people got a little bit of a pickle with this as well, and think of it as you do in the salon now as colour change, and very often you have to go through the same sort of process to change a colour as you would if you were correcting a colour. So that we have clarified a little bit more. We haven't made anything easier. I think we've just made it broader so the learners aren't so restricted. Creatively style and dress long hair. And as you can see, 80% of the hair should be taken up. Now, we aren't going to be putting tape measures on heads and working out percentages, although this would support our maths and numeracy skills. It just gives you an idea that we are expecting a substantial amount of the hair to be dressed up, rather than just a little bit of the fringe and a quiff at the front. These are the observations were all taken under supervised conditions, and afterwards you would collect up all their pictures and things like that. Now, when we go through the real work, I will remind you about the expectations of photos and give you some hints and tips as well. So for task 3, and in some cases this is where it let learners down a little bit. It was a little bit of read the recipe of what they made. So with the service it was, well, first I did this, then I did that, and there was quite a small amount of evaluation going on. So when you're going through your formative, this part is really important for them to start to justify what they're doing, why they're doing it. And I know that Diane Mitchell, when she held her network meeting, she has said it's about talking about your inner child and keep going why to your learners. Now that will also help them with their written exam. So here's the marking grid. Those of you that haven't gone through the observations yet will become very friendly with this marking grid, and make sure you have it to hand when you're doing observations. Start looking at the wording that they use in the descriptors. Need to remind everybody, and sorry if everybody's had this drummed into them so many times, but Band 1 isn't necessarily a pass. Band 2 isn't necessarily a merit. Do you see what I mean? So, if you've got a learner who is predominantly being placed in Band 1, it's highly likely they're going to fail. And you can see that by the use of the words poor to limited, careless, imprecise, flawed. And those learners are not ready for this assessment yet. I hate to say that, you know, there's no way in this world that they're going to get through, but I think they are not going to achieve this. So I know as my own centre, we've had to be really careful with when we go through interviews and making sure that this is right for the learner to do this qualification, and maybe with part of careers advice that they might have had to go out and do a little bit more in industry before they came back to this one. So if we look at Band 3 descriptor, we'll see that the wording really notches up here. It's called about being persistent, perfecting, refining, accurate, faultless, meticulous. Those are the sort of words that should jump into your head when you're watching somebody work. Now, when you're doing the practical observation, you aren't necessarily giving marks because you can't. They haven't done task 3 yet. But I think in your head, you've got to feel, where does that learner sit? So this is holistic, and you're looking at all 3 services together. So here we've got the learner materials, and you can see that this learner did plan very, very well. And I think we saw last year Victoria Beckham in many centres, and many learners seem to like this cut. It is a good example of disconnection, and I think many learners tried to strive for this one. Not all made it, but you can see with this learner that she's thought of everything: the tools, the products, the aftercare, any testing she's need to do, her angles that she's need to be able to use, and with the creative colour, again, the testing. What colour does she suggest is going to be used? What aftercare is going to happen? How is she going to place the colour? What about sectioning? How is she going to protect the client? All the health and safety as well. And in the hair up, it's easy when learners put photos in their planning, because you really get in your head what they're aiming to do. Now, they may have 3 or 4 different pictures that look slightly different, and they'll say, well, I'm taking the fringe from this area, the back from that area, and I'm going to make it wavier, curlier, straighter. But we're looking that somebody has had the understanding to be able to plan the 3 areas or services that they have to cover as part of task 2. So here you've got the learner has actually written down this is like her consultation, really. This is what she's going to do. Now, last year we did have quite a lot of centres, although it did tell you not to, naughty. Consultation sheets should not be pre-populated with areas that are going to be seen as prompts. Your learners, by this point, when you put them in for the synoptic end test, that they are ready for this. They know what they have to do. It becomes second nature to them. So they should easily be able to list down what they would maybe have put in a client analysis sheet in the old days. Okay. And this learner has also thought a lot about her time management. And this is what she plans to do. And you can see that she's planned in a bit of a break and some lunch. Now, we know, before everybody says, that in industry, lunch is probably one of those things that's on the wish list that never really happened. But I think it's important to do this because I know when I went to centres, and I know a lot of the moderators said students were absolutely flagging in the second 3 hours where they hadn't been able to take a break. Now remember, and we have written it into this year's, that they can have somebody supporting them that is of a lower level. They cannot do the work for them, but they could be in there making the tea, tidying up, getting ready for the next service under instruction from that learner. So that will help them. And also remember, when you're 6 hours is a long time to be nervous and to be a little bit apprehensive. So we do need to let them have the odd break. So record card here, you can see she's filled it in. This is just a photocopy of the actual record card that used in the centre. So it's important that they have that. This is something that it's good practice, if nothing else, that we should do in all of our centres. So, and I know, Alison, you asked me a question in the one this morning, whether or not they should put that in as part of evidence. Yes, please do.
And that's okay to be sort of pre-populated with all those
Yes,
kind of things, isn't
absolutely.
it? There's not really anything in
It's
there
not,
that
it's
would help
not a
them,
prompt.
is it? No. That's fine.
Here is the learner's recording form. She's recording some of the consultation that she's gone through again, goes in a little bit deeper about the colour that she's going to do, and any factors to be taken into consideration, like hair, double crown, face shape, and also the type of hair that it is as well, the classifications. And that's just continuing with that. So here is the cut and colour before pictures. Now, this one's slightly disappointing in that they never think about what's behind the client. And it's not so bad with the before pictures, we can see, and most of the pictures here are quite clear. But if they were only to take that picture on a plain background, or stand that client up in front of what looks like a window blind, that probably would have been a lot easier to see. So here's the after, and I think you would agree, actually, she's done quite a good job at making her look like Victoria Beckham, hasn't she?
She does.
But
it's just like her.
Mostly, importantly, is to look at how you can actually see that haircut. She has totally restyled that, there is disconnection, and she's had the client stood in front of a plain background that we can easily see. This is going to be really important for you. Make sure before that client model leaves the room that you have checked what the photo looks like. Because sometimes the learners will take them on phones or a camera that isn't very good, and then you can barely see anything that's come out. So in some centres they have had a technician or somebody similar that can come in and take the photos under instruction from the student, because they want to obviously present it in the best way, and then they come back and show them the photos very quickly before that client goes, and that is really important. We saw lots and lots of pictures that we could not make out what it was, and the easiest ones for us to see were those that were imported in onto a Word document. It was very easy for us to look at, so please do consider that carefully.
Because also we can then zoom in to some of the detail. We can see some of that detail within that. We zoom right in as moderators, we can see the kind of the technique a bit better, can't we? So.
And here again, the before one is in front of everything in the world, but and we can clearly see the hair is quite long. Okay, we can see the type of hair it is, and then we go on to the after. And I think you'll agree, you know, that student has shown good hair control, good level of finish, and the marks have been according to this. And I've been hairdressing for 37 years. Now, I could probably pick holes in a few things that you see in the finish and the absolute, but let's think where these learners are at. And think back to in the salon, when you're taking on a member of staff, you do a skills test. Are you looking for potential? This is someone that's in their second year ever, probably, of hairdressing. They might be in their third, but second year. And you think, I can see potential, they're at where they're at. Would a client pay for this? Would a client pick holes in this? I don't think so. I think a client would pay for that and be quite happy. So that's good enough for me. And that. So she has shown a few different angles from her pictures, and you'll see in this year's task it very clearly says how many photos to send in. Now you can take lots, but please pick out the ones that are the best. Last year we did have, I think the record was 75 pictures per learner that were uploaded onto the platform. Apart from it taking hours, the poor person that was in the centre, it just meant that we were going through picture after picture that was barely any difference. So when we said 360-degree pictures, we didn't mean 360 at every degree, okay? So that's what we thought. It was, you know, you live and learn. So hair up, this is her evaluation. And I think with her evaluation, there was a fair degree in there of telling us what the recipe was, as opposed to a huge amount of evaluation. It was like, it was looking nice. Now, where we had learners that really missed opportunities last year was when they just put, I think it all went really well, or I didn't really like that colour, I would have done a lighter colour. It's not really an evaluation, so support your learners in doing this. When you're doing the formative assessments, if you're giving them some practices, make sure they practice task 3 as well, and maybe do that as a group, and look at each of the photos. But remember that we've got moderators sitting at home trying to agree with your marks. So when they want to agree with your mark, nobody's looking to catch you out. They want to see all the evidence that they can that really supports that. Now, when we talk a little bit about standardisation in a minute, I'll talk about making sure that as part of your quality assurance check, that you've got all the evidence uploaded for that learner, because we have also seen where marks were given for different tasks but then no evidence uploaded, and they'd left it to the 12th hour of being able to upload, and then it's then gone on holiday. And it's very difficult for us then to try and contact people or to get any work sent in. So here we've got the cut and colour. She's written quite a lot. And, you know, some people say, well, maybe that's too much for the hour that they were given then. But actually, I've watched learners, and they're near enough touch typists these days. They can wang out quite a lot. And watch the television and text at the same time. Okay. So declaration of authenticity here. This has changed a little bit from last year for those of you that offered it last year. And at the bottom you'll see, has the candidate received any additional support in the production of this work? And you tick yes or no. Because sometimes we've looked at pictures and we've looked at the evidence that's uploaded and we think, well, the centre hasn't given them very many marks. I wonder why that is. And that might be that they've had a little bit of support on the day. You know, that learner's maybe got very nervous or something's happened with the model and they've had a little bit of support, and the marks have been adjusted accordingly. So it's important that you list down anything that's going to affect the marks there. This is your practical observation form, and we did have questions in the first time saying, do we have to do all these forms? I would suggest yes. Some of them you do have to, but if you don't do these forms, we all think we've got memories of an elephant, but it doesn't work that way, when actually it can be 2 or 3 weeks down the road when you're actually putting your justification marks in. So all the evidence you've got, all the evidence you can upload for that moderator is just good. It makes life a lot easier, it makes the whole process run smoothly. So in here you can see this is a bit of a story by the observer that may not be the same person that's putting in the marks or the justification. So this person has written in overall, holistically, across the 3 services. They're not written separately, but they've picked things out. And you can see that there's consistency written in there, acting professionally, planning's clear and detailed. Lindsay was polite and professional. Clients were looked after at all times with customer care. And the aftercare advice was there. So they've ticked all the boxes there, haven't they? They've covered everything that they could possibly cover. And in AO2, with their understanding, this is really, were they able to apply that knowledge? So they carried out the relevant tests. They knew the tests that they had to take. So not only is that the knowledge, they knew, right, I've got to do these tests, they knew which ones, so that showed the understanding. Recording the outcomes, taking all factors into consideration. Now, that person probably took a lot of factors into consideration as opposed to just 1 or 2, or was just going through the motions. Choice of tools, showed clear understanding of what she needed to use. She gave individual aftercare advice to each client, good knowledge of the services carried out, plan to implement them, put it into practice, demonstrated good time management, and she ensured all finished looks were personalised. And I think that's a big one that takes that person into the top banding, is that personalisation, that extra little cherry on top of the cake.
I think along with that, Margaret, I know that people new to this type of assessment and the technicals might wonder where during a practical performance a candidate could show these particular objectives, and they might want to then just concentrate on assessment objective number 3 because it says that it's application of practical or technical skills. But as we can see here by these comments, actually throughout a performance, a practical performance, that candidates can show lots of different skills, can't they?
Yes, they can. But just looking at it in a different way, your candidates are going to have knowledge, which might be they know the answer to that, but they're not necessarily understanding why. They've learned route. If they then justify it, they're showing their understanding. So this really helps them. With AO3, that's all your practical side, high creative skill ability. This is your top-end learner. Bringing it all together in AO4, making adjustments, worked independently. So that's quite clear that we know she didn't have any help. AO5, personalise that cut, check the shape, balance, and weight of that cut and that finished look, stood back, had a look at it. You know that learner that is fluid, aren't they, in the way that they are tackling the service, the way that they are showing dexterity and confidence in what they're doing. So here's the candidate record form. This is where the justification comments are going. And this AO1 is about that breadth, depth, and accuracy. So again, it's picking out the safe working practices, manufacturer's instructions. Now, I went to a few centres and when you go as a moderator, you're rank ordering learners, and that conversation afterwards with your moderator, although they can't discuss marks that they would give, you can't give marks because they haven't done task 3 at this point. So we might talk about rank ordering, and I know that when they said, oh, I'd put that person in the middle band for AO1, and I thought, well, I watched them and I couldn't see absolutely anything that she'd missed out. And I said, so why did you decide to do that and not the top one? And they said, because she didn't read the manufacturer's instructions. Well, you don't have to read them. You can just watch somebody know as the mixing is correct, the ratios for the colour are correct, they know how to use the products. That tells you that they followed manufacturer's instructions. They don't have to read it all. So AO2, this is understanding security of concepts, cortical links. So you've got the clear direction of thought. That person is not standing and scratching their head. They actually go, right, these are the test results, this is what I'm going to do, this is how I'm going to change it slightly because of this. This included explanations which were tailored to each client very well.
I'm just looking here, Margaret, and it's bothering me because these numbers are wrong.
Oh, right, okay.
So just to be aware of this, that this we weren't able to change this at the last point in time since PDF. So just to be aware that some of the numbers, these percentage weightings, are incorrect for this qualification. So as I said earlier, for this year,
yeah.
Yes. And so it is important that you use the right documentation. This particular form is correct for this year. However, some of these marks, according to the percentage weighting, are incorrect because we didn't actually change those because they're last year's. So yeah, so just to check out for that, we will give you the correct documents when we've done those edits. Okay. So I'm just sitting here listening to you and looking at those percentages, thinking, well, I know that's not right. So if we go on to the slides then, Margaret, and then we can sort of show the justification of your marking along with those comments in the marking grid, then for each of those assessment objectives.
Okay, so AO1, you can see they marked the top of that band. This learner, as we read before, followed manufacturer's instructions, good professional presentation, personal hygiene was exemplary, very wide range of products, tools and equipment used, that showed evidence of the learner's strong knowledge. AO2, again, marked at the top, consistent, clear direction shown in a clear, detailed planning, taking into account all relevant factors, as said before. Test results were interpreted. Now that's quite a high order word as well to use, because that person has really thought about the test, the results, they've showed their understanding by coming to the conclusion of what they're going to do. Here for AO3, their practical skills, consistently high levels. So this one, confident approach, good communication. Now I saw some good work as well, but also some poor communication. And I think it's very important to make sure that the candidate doesn't treat their mum, if it's mum that's come in, or cousin or auntie or friend, as their cousin, auntie, friend, that they actually treat them as a client, as if they were in a real situation within a salon. So sometimes the communication was difficult, and later on we can give you an example of how you can improve that. So,
sorry,
that's right, it goes back slightly. I hadn't quite finished.
Sorry.
Okay. So learner one showed consistently high levels of dexterity. Her skills came naturally. We can look at a learner, can't we, and think that really is coming naturally to you. You really understand the feel of the hair. You've got mastery of what you're doing, and it makes you feel comfortable, doesn't it? You're not on the edge of your seat thinking, "Oh my goodness, what are they going to do next?" This is the one that you sit back and go, "Actually, I feel comfortable with what you're doing." So bringing it all together, I think, oh, it was the next slide that was, oh, sorry.
Wasn't it? Oh yes, it was AO5.
Yeah, rewind to that one, okay. So this person independently was able to draw on their depth of knowledge. They were able to deal with a set of complex problems throughout the day, stay on top of tasks. Now it could be that they had to reapply some colour, and they're thinking that that put them out with their time management, but then they had to adjust some other part of their planning. So that's what you're expecting to see there, a confident, precise learner that has excellent time management. This one looks slightly different, you may notice, and that's because at lastminute.com we were changing this one. So here, the learner, where it's got attending to detail, perfecting, finish looks demonstrate precision, strong evidence of effort, weight and balance regularly checked. But I think with this, the whole attending to detail was really also about the task 3 and the evaluation. So you can see that sometimes they can lose a few marks in certain areas because they're not quite covering everything.
Lovely. I just want to go back, Margaret, to the material itself, and because one thing that we didn't talk about was the final total mark, right. Because this candidate's got 54 out of 60. Now, just as a note really, because we did notice on some uploads last year that these marks here, so 6 plus 9 plus 15, all of those, were not totaled up correctly, and so subsequently the person that was entering the marks onto the moderation portal entered the wrong marks, which made the marking look inaccurate. So just as a pointer there, make sure that you do your maths properly.
That might be part of your standardisation and quality assurance process.
Indeed, yes.
And it's easily done.
It is. Do it all the time. Right, so we're at the questions bit to our webinar now. So I'd like you to encourage you to place your questions in that in the questions box in the control panel. We have already started to get a few coming through. So what we're going to do now is we're going to leave you for a couple of minutes to continue tapping those questions in. I'm going to stop the recording, put us on mute, and then we'll see you back here in about 2 or 3 minutes. Okay, welcome back everybody. We've got a few questions now that we can start to give you some answers to. So we have one here from Melanie, which is under creative cut and colour. In the last bulletin, it states 3 things, which is restoring depth and tone, neutralising tone, and colouring resistant hair. So the question is, do they have to do one of these 3 listed or all 3, Margaret?
If you look at the very latest assignment that's been sent out now, you'll find that they are put under each other, mostly in bullet points now, separated it out. No, they don't have to do all of them, no matter how they put it or laid it out on the assignment. You are just asked to do a small amount of colour correction, just to show that they've got the knowledge and understanding for that.
Okay, next question. We've got, can they take their plan in, presumably to task 2, or is it just a picture?
They can take their whole plan in, because you collected it after task 1, and then you bring it in for task 2. Because they may well have gone through all of the consultation and everything. It may be a different person that's doing the observation than was sitting with them in task 1. So it's very important that they do have it.
Okay, next question from Hayley. Is the hair up a standalone, or can it be incorporated with the colour or cut?
You can incorporate it with the colour or cut. Minimum clients you can do is 2. Personally, if I was tackling this myself, I would probably do 3, because in my little head I would have pre-cut and styled someone's hair, and then I would do the colour on that one and not have too long a hair, and then I would do my creative cut, and then I would probably do a hair up with a different model, personally. But that's really how you're discussing it with your learners. Where some centres and learners found it very hard was where they were doing this huge amount of colouring on hair that was halfway down their back, and they were doing very complicated colour, and that took far too long. So really try and think about breaking them down a bit.
Okay, so Olivia's come in with some clarification, I think, to her previous question, which is, can they take their consultation plan in with them during the trade test, or is this prompt?
No, it's not a problem. It's their own work. They're not taking in any other work other than their own, and that's all part of their planning, and they might have done their time management then. So yes, they can have it with them.
Okay, next one's from Hayley again. If a candidate uses a family member who doesn't speak any English, do we need to have an interpreter?
Well, we had a little conflab over this actually, and no, you don't need an interpreter. I shouldn't think so. If you've got one to hand, then it might be handy. But they're going to give them aftercare advice, aren't they? They're going through the consultation. They're then going to explain to you what they have said. So why would they wouldn't lie, would they? So they're going to tell you what they're going to do. So no.
And then another one we've got, our moderator has asked for 6 candidates. Do you think this is too many?
No, I mean, that's the limit that we suggest, that you actually assess, or one marker or one observer observes at any one time. That's up to you. And why the moderator asks for 6 is they're just asking for a nice cross range, really, because they're asking for somebody from top, middle and bottom. If possible, you may not have anyone from the bottom. They may all be your high flyers that you're going to see, especially if the moderator is coming early. What's important is that we have a cross-section of all markers. So everybody that's doing the observations, so if you've got 2 or 3 in the centre, they need to have, say, 2 learners from each of them, because that's part of this moderation process.
And one of the rules with regards to uploading your sample, which you'll read in the centre marking moderation guide, is that we need to see in that sample at least 50% of those that we saw on the visit. So if we had less than 6, for example, I mean, sometimes that has to be the case, because a cohort might be less than 6 itself. But if we had, ideally, we want to see 3 people uploaded with their evidence from that 6 that we saw at a visit. So if you made it 4, for example, you know, you're cutting down your options about whether we see again that candidate during the remote moderation activity. So I think that's the important thing, is try to make it that 6 if you possibly can, because then it makes it much easier for us to get to see and to abide by those rules for uploading your sample. And I think we might have come to the end of the questions there, Margaret.
Okay.
So whilst we go through the last couple of slides, I will ask you to continue to write in your questions, because we can get those questions off this webinar and we will make sure that we answer them later on. We will make sure that they get published or emailed to you along with the recording of this webinar. So, so please make sure that you continue to type in those questions as we go along. So on the next slide, we have here a reminder of typical internal standardisation activities. I'm sure that some of you have carried out some of these activities anyway and are doing so along the way. Please make sure that you don't leave those activities until the end of the course, because obviously some of these need to be done before you even start teaching it, really. So, and obviously when you're waiting right until the end, when you're marking your summative assessment, obviously you'll have to carry out standardisation activities for that. But prior to that, hopefully you've carried out some of these suggested ones. So, Margaret, if you've got any specific sort of subject-related activities that you'd like to extend this with?
Yeah, in some of your centres you might only have one person that's doing the assessment, observations, or as a marker. But so long as somebody else comes in with them, maybe in some of your formative synoptics that you're carrying out. And I've done it myself with a subject that is not my background. It was for beauty, and I'm hairdressing through and through. But I was able to help that one person in the centre because I was thinking of myself as the client and thinking, does it look like she's talking to the client very nicely? Does it look like the flow of her facial looks like it would be very relaxing? So, and then afterwards we rank ordered them, and then we talked through and probably spent about an hour going through the top one. And we went through all the AOs and sort of felt where that person sat after they'd done their formative. So that was a good exercise. And then the person that was the marker went off and she marked the rest of them. So whatever way works for you, but don't think because you're the only one that somebody else couldn't come in. And just be that critical friend, really. And maybe saying, well, why have you given them those sorts of marks? So this was after they'd done all the tasks. And I think, Alison, you suggested that it's really quite good. We've done it. Brought in employers to be part of the formative. It helps employers understand the qualification and where they're at, and it also helps the learners to feel like they're in those exam conditions a little bit. So it heightens the awareness slightly. But any of those are really good practice. And you are supposed to upload as well evidence that you have done some quality assurance processes.
Yeah, there is a form, isn't there? That,
yes.
Declaration of Standardisation form that you need to upload. So
that's the one.
Yeah, that's the one. So, okay, if we go on to the next slide, we have got the support and resources that are available to you via City and Guilds. We've got the City and Guilds website itself, which contains all those documents that you should be reading. If you have a look at the technicals webpage, then you can find all the kind of generic documents. But then obviously if you tap in your qualification number in the search bar at the top right hand side of the screen, you'll find then that you can get into your qualification handbook, your assessment materials, past papers and those sorts of things. I'll signpost where the qualification report is as well, so there's that link. Hopefully that will work for us today. But also we've got the technical and moderation support team. That's their email address there and their telephone number. I would urge you to contact them if you have any other questions following this webinar. but also that along the way you should, along the delivery of this qualification, if you have got any questions, try not to, even if you do have the contact details of your moderator, try not to email them with those questions. If you use the technical and moderation support team, they might direct the question back to the principal moderator, who actually will be then being able to standardise the responses to those questions much more readily than asking individual moderators. So we want that message to be very clear to centres and very in a standard approach, so that those decisions in your centres can be aligned very well. So please don't use your moderator as almost like you would use an EQA as a support kind of in a supportive role. So I'm just going to see if we can get through to that link for the qualification report, because I'd like to show you where exactly that belongs. Page not found. I didn't do it last time, did it, Margaret?
No, it's going to make you do it. I did it on purpose.
6002 into that bar, and then if we go into documents, we can see we're going to look at level 3 assessment materials. If we scroll down to past papers, we'll see right at the bottom there we have got the qualification report. And click on that, and hopefully it won't take too long to open. There it is. So this qualification report is written every year, and it's written by Margaret and also the Chief Examiner for the qualification. It will show you data coming out of the assessment for the last year, so 2017. You can see the qualification as a whole, the grade distribution, and you can see what those grades look like. So in the main, people got a merit for the full qualification. And then if we scroll through, we can see the data coming out of, including the grade boundaries for the 2 theory exams. And then finally, and also actually some commentary by the Chief Examiner as to how well those questions were responded to in the centres. So, and the same goes for the synoptic assignment. So as you can see here, we've got the grade boundaries for the synoptic, and the distinction grade boundary for last year is 48. So that piece that you've just looked at with Margaret is well into that distinction boundary there. So, and look at this data here, which states that 84% of candidates actually passed their synoptic assignment, 18% of those got a distinction, 36% got a merit, and 30% got a pass. So it looks like you're doing some really good things in your centres, so keep up the good work. You'll see, as well as the data, the principal moderator commentary, which will tell you all about the pitfalls and good bits that centres were doing that Margaret has highlighted for you there. So it's a really good idea to have a little read through that document. It's not lots of pages, it's only 11 pages. So as I say, just get hold of that, and it'll guide you for this year's assessment. So I will just go back to the set of slides, and we're on the last one there. I'd like to thank Margaret for her time and her valued expertise in this subject area. Thanks very much, Margaret.
You are very welcome.
And I'd also like to thank you for attending this webinar. I hope you have found it very useful.